Sleep with 5 Apache women or die. The cowboy helped the chief, but 300 warriors surrounded him. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty plains. The cowboy rode steadily, his horse's hooves kicking up small clouds of sand and dirt with every step. He was a man used to danger, used to thinking quickly, but this ride felt different. The wind carried a strange silence, as if the world itself was holding its breath. He had heard stories about the Apache villages scattered across this territory, stories of fierce warriors, strong traditions, and challenges that could test even the bravest men. But nothing had prepared him for what was about to happen. He spotted the village at the edge of a canyon, its smoke rising from small fires like quiet signals into the sky. The structures were simple but sturdy, made from the earth and timber around them. Women moved between them, carrying water, preparing food, and tending children. Men sharpened weapons or sat in circles, speaking in low voices. From a distance, it all looked peaceful, but the cowboy knew better. Danger often hides behind calmness. As he approached, he felt the weight of the moment. The wind changed direction, and he smelled smoke and earth mixed with a faint, metallic tang, like tension itself had a scent. His horse whinnied nervously, sensing something in the air. The cowboy's hand hovered near his holster, though he had no desire to draw his weapon unless there was no other choice. This was a place where courage was measured not just by force, but by understanding. A figure emerged from the center of the village, tall and commanding. It was the chief. His presence alone seemed to shift the energy around them. Every eye in the village turned toward the cowboy. The chief's expression was unreadable, calm, but with an intensity that made the cowboy tighten his grip on the reins. "You are far from home, stranger," the chief said in clear, strong tones. His English was not perfect, but it carried authority. "What brings you to this land?" The cowboy straightened in his saddle. "I mean no trouble," he replied carefully. "I'm just passing through." "I seek no fight." The chief studied him, his gaze sharp and steady. Then, without warning, he spoke words that froze the cowboy in place. "Sleep with 5 Apache women or die." The air seemed to thicken around them. The cowboy blinked, certain he had misheard. "Excuse me?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm, steady. The chief did not flinch. "You have a choice. One path leads to your death. The other, well, that is for you to decide." The cowboy's mind raced. He had heard of tests, of trials meant to prove courage, but this was something beyond comprehension. He looked around, trying to understand the intentions behind the words. The women in the village went about their work, seemingly unaware, but he could see the tension in the men's stances, the way they gripped their weapons a little tighter. This was not a bluff. The danger was real. Yet something in the chief's eyes told him there was more to this than what was spoken. There was desperation, a need that went beyond cruelty. Perhaps the chief needed help, a way to solve a problem that could not be solved through violence alone. The cowboy had faced life-or-death decisions before, but this required more than courage. It required wisdom, understanding, and an unwavering sense of honor. He dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate. The horse seemed to sense his tension, shifting nervously beneath him. The cowboy knew that any sudden action could be mistaken for aggression. He took a deep breath, letting the desert air fill his lungs, and walked toward the chief. "I do not understand why this test is necessary," he said quietly, meeting the chief's gaze. "But I am willing to help if there is another way." The chief studied him for a long moment, then he motioned toward the village. "You may walk among my people," he said. "Observe. Understand, decide if you can help us without losing your honor. But know this, every man here watches you, every move, every word. One mistake and you will not leave this place alive." The cowboy nodded. He had dealt with dangers before, but the weight of hundreds of eyes watching his every action was unlike anything he had faced. The villagers were quiet, curious, and cautious. The women continued their work, the men waited in the shadows, and children peeked from behind the buildings, sensing the tension without understanding it. He moved through the village, careful not to offend. He greeted elders with respect, nodded to the women carrying water, and observed the layout of the village with quiet attention. He noted the patterns, where the warriors gathered, where the fires burned brightest, the pathways through the settlement. Every detail mattered. Survival depended on understanding, not force. As he walked, the chief followed silently, a shadow at the edge of his vision. Finally, the chief spoke again, his voice low. "This test is not what it seems. The women are not the challenge. The danger lies elsewhere." The cowboy's brow furrowed. Then what is the challenge? The chief's eyes darkened. My people face threats from beyond these lands, other tribes, rival groups, men who would see us destroyed. I needed to know if you could be trusted, if you could think beyond yourself. A flicker of understanding came to the cowboy. This was not about cruelty, but about judgment. The chief's method was harsh, yes, but it tested more than courage. It tested morality, intelligence, and respect. He realized that the survival of the village might very well depend on his next decisions. He spent the day learning, observing, and speaking cautiously with villagers. Every conversation, every movement was calculated. He discovered small disputes among the people, frustrations, and fears. The chief trusted him to gather information, to see the village through his own eyes, and perhaps to help mediate the problems that simmered beneath the surface. As the sun dipped lower, shadows lengthened across the plains. The cowboy found himself in a small circle with a few of the village elders. They spoke of past conflicts, of dangers that had stalked their people, of alliances broken and restored. The cowboy listened more than he spoke, learning the history, the fears, and the hopes of this tight-knit community. By evening, he understood the magnitude of what was asked. The chief's ultimatum was a test, yes, but it was also a call for help. The cowboy felt the weight of responsibility settle over him like a heavy cloak. He could not simply walk away. To do so would mean leaving these people vulnerable, and that was a choice he could not make. He returned to the chief, who waited silently by the largest fire in the village. The flames flickered against the chief's stern face, casting deep shadows that made him appear even more formidable. "I will help," the cowboy said finally, "but I will do it without harming anyone. I will find a way to honor your people and your trust." The chief nodded slowly, a faint spark of approval in his eyes. "Then you walk a dangerous path," he said. "Every man, every warrior here watches you. One wrong step, one misjudged word, and they will strike. You may think you understand danger, stranger, but you have yet to see what surrounds you." The cowboy looked out across the village, the men, the shadows, the fires. His heart pounded in his chest, not with fear, but with awareness. He knew the test had only just begun. He had survived the first moment of terror, but the night would bring new challenges. He would need to prove his courage, his intelligence, and his honor if he wanted to leave alive. As darkness fell, the sounds of the village changed. The chatter quieted, the fires flickered, and a cold wind swept through the canyon. The cowboy settled near his horse, keeping his senses alert. He understood that this was not a simple journey. Every movement, every decision would carry weight. The chief's words echoed in his mind. "One mistake and you will not leave this place alive." Sleep would be elusive. Danger was near. And somewhere in the shadows, the eyes of 300 warriors followed him, unseen but felt, waiting to see who he truly was. The cowboy closed his eyes briefly, gathering his thoughts, steeling his mind for the trials ahead. He had entered a world of testing, honor, and life-and-death stakes, and tomorrow he would need every ounce of skill, courage, and understanding to survive. The wind whispered across the plains, carrying a message only the brave could hear. In this place, courage was more than survival, it was the measure of a man. And the cowboy, despite every fear, every doubt, was ready to meet it. The night was quiet, but the cowboy did not sleep. He sat beside his horse, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant calls of animals in the canyon. Every sound seemed louder in the darkness, every shadow a possible threat. He thought about the chief's words, about the impossible demand, and about the test he was undergoing. This was not just about survival. It was about understanding a people whose customs and values were very different from his own. Morning arrived slowly, painting the sky with pale pink and gold. The cowboy rose, stretched, and approached the village again. The chief was waiting for him near the largest building, a simple structure made from wood and clay. He did not smile, but there was a faint approval in his eyes. "You survived the night," the chief said. "That is the first step." The cowboy nodded. "I need to understand your people," he said. "I need to know how I can help without harming anyone." The chief motioned for him to follow. "Then you will walk among us. Watch, listen, learn, and in time you will understand the challenge you face." The cowboy walked through the village slowly, careful to greet the elders, nod to the women working in the fields, and speak respectfully to the children. He observed the layout, the patterns of movement, and the interactions between people. Every small detail mattered. He noticed how the women shared tasks, how the men organized the defense of the village, and how the children learned through observation and play. He spent hours listening to the elders. They spoke of past attacks, of rival groups that had tried to steal their land or harm their people. They spoke of alliances, broken promises, and the importance of trust. The cowboy realized that the chief's test was not just for him. It was a reflection of the challenges the village faced every day. The women were not the test. The test was whether he could navigate this world with honor, respect, and intelligence. As the day went on, the cowboy began speaking with the younger warriors. He asked about their skills, their training, and their understanding of the land. They were cautious at first, watching his every move, but they began to answer his questions, testing him with small challenges and observing his reactions. The cowboy demonstrated his knowledge of survival, his ability to stay calm under pressure, and his willingness to learn. Slowly, he began to earn a small measure of trust. The chief watched from a distance, silent and observing. He did not speak, but the cowboy could feel his gaze. It was heavy, full of judgment, but also of guidance. The chief's presence reminded him that every action had consequences, every word could be misinterpreted, and every movement mattered. By midday, the cowboy had noticed something troubling. The warriors had begun to gather in small groups, whispering and watching him more closely. Their eyes followed him wherever he went, and the tension in the village was growing. The chief's test was becoming more dangerous, and the cowboy realized that he was now under the scrutiny of hundreds of people, not just one. He approached the chief, careful to keep his tone respectful. "They are watching me closely," he said. "I can feel the tension." "What should I do?" The chief's eyes were calm, but his voice was firm. "Do not show fear, do not act recklessly, speak with respect. Observe, and remember that your actions speak louder than words. The villagers will judge you by what you do, not what you say." The cowboy nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He spent the afternoon helping with small tasks, offering assistance in ways that did not offend the villagers. He carried water, helped repair small structures, and offered advice when asked. He was careful to show humility, patience, and respect. Every gesture was measured, deliberate, and meant to demonstrate his willingness to help rather than dominate. As the sun began to lower in the sky, the tension in the village increased. The whispers of the warriors grew louder, and the cowboy realized that they had begun to gather in larger numbers. He estimated that 300 warriors were now watching him from the shadows, their weapons ready, their eyes sharp and calculating. The danger was immediate and real. He took a deep breath and walked to the center of the village where the chief stood. "I understand now," he said quietly. "The challenge is not about what you asked at first. It is about trust, honor, and courage. I will help you and I will protect your people without causing harm." The chief nodded slowly. "Good, but words are not enough. You must show this through action, and the warriors will judge you more harshly than I will." The cowboy knew this was true. He had faced danger before, but never like this, surrounded by so many under constant observation, with every mistake potentially fatal. He moved carefully, aware of every step, every gesture, and every word. As night approached, the village prepared for a demonstration of the cowboy's intentions. The chief asked him to organize a small task that would help the community. It was a test of leadership, judgment, and respect. The cowboy gathered a small group of helpers, directing them with clarity and patience. He showed respect for the elders, listened to the warriors' advice, and encouraged the women and children to participate safely. The task was completed successfully, and the chief observed in silence. The warriors, however, were still wary. They whispered among themselves, watching the cowboy closely, testing his reactions and waiting for any sign of weakness. The cowboy felt their eyes on him, heavy and unyielding. He knew that survival depended not just on skill, but on maintaining calm under pressure, demonstrating honor, and showing respect for their traditions. During the evening, the cowboy was approached by one of the younger warriors. "Why do you help us?" the young man asked quietly. "You could leave at any time. You are not bound to us." The cowboy looked at him steadily. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said simply. "Because your people deserve help, because courage is more than facing danger. It is about doing what is right, even when it is hard." The young warrior studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I see," he said. "Perhaps you are not like the others who come here. Perhaps you are worthy." The cowboy felt a small relief. One warrior's trust did not mean safety, but it was a beginning. He realized that respect and understanding were slowly changing the atmosphere in the village. The tension was still there, but it was no longer as heavy, as suffocating. The villagers were beginning to see him not just as a stranger, but as someone willing to walk among them with honor. But the danger was far from gone. The whispers of the warriors continued, and he could sense that their trust was fragile. One wrong move, one poorly chosen word could undo all of his careful work. He remained vigilant, aware of every shadow, every gesture, and every sound. As night fell, the village settled into a tense quiet. The cowboy found a place near the fire to rest, keeping one eye open for any sudden movement. He reflected on the day's events, the lessons he had learned, and the dangers that still lay ahead. The chief's challenge was not over. The warrior's judgment was still pending, and the task of helping the village, protecting its people, and surviving under scrutiny was far from complete. The wind swept through the canyon, carrying a chill that made the cowboy shiver. He knew that tomorrow would bring new tests, new challenges, and new dangers. But he also knew that he had proven something important, that courage, respect, and honor could make a difference, even in the most difficult situations. He settled near his horse, keeping his senses alert, aware that the 300 warriors surrounding the village would not forget him, would not forgive mistakes easily, and would continue to watch his every move. The cowboy closed his eyes briefly, gathering his strength for the challenges ahead. The night was long, filled with the sounds of the desert, the crackle of fires, and the silent watch of the warriors. But the cowboy's resolve was firm. He had entered this village as a stranger, faced an impossible demand, and begun to navigate a world that measured honor and courage in ways he had never experienced. And he knew that as dawn approached, he would face new challenges, challenges that would test not just his skills but his very character. The village slept lightly, but the cowboy stayed awake, thinking, observing, and planning. He understood that trust had to be earned, respect had to be shown, and courage had to be constant. He would continue to walk among them to help, to observe, and to prove that he was worthy, not through words but through actions. And somewhere in the shadows, the 300 warriors waited, their eyes sharp, their minds alert. The cowboy knew that he had survived the first day, but the real test was only beginning. The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying a message only the brave could hear. Courage was not measured by strength alone, but by patience, understanding, and the willingness to face impossible odds. The cowboy had begun this journey, and he was ready to see it through, no matter the danger, no matter the cost. The morning sun cast long shadows across the village as the cowboy rose, feeling the weight of the day ahead pressing on him. The night had been quiet, but he had not slept well. The 300 warriors he had felt surrounding the village in the darkness were still very much present, their eyes watching every movement, waiting for a single mistake. The cowboy knew that today would test him more than anything before. He could no longer rely on small gestures or quiet respect. Today, he would need to prove his courage, intelligence, and honor in a way that could determine his survival. He walked to the center of the village, where the chief awaited. The elder's expression was unreadable, calm but heavy with expectation. The cowboy felt the pressure of 100 unseen eyes on him, the silent judgment of men who had faced danger all their lives. He bowed slightly, showing respect, and spoke carefully. "I am ready to do what is needed, Chief. Tell me how I can help today." The chief nodded. "You have shown patience and understanding, but the warriors still doubt your intentions. Today, they will test you directly. You must show that your actions protect our people, respect our ways, and demonstrate courage. One wrong move and they may strike. The test is not just for your survival, it is for your honor and for the trust of everyone in this village." The cowboy nodded, feeling the tension tighten in his chest. He moved through the village, careful to stay calm, every gesture precise. The villagers watched silently, aware that the day would reveal whether this stranger was truly trustworthy. The young warrior who had spoken to him yesterday followed from a distance, his eyes wary but curious. As the sun climbed higher, the first group of warriors approached. They moved like shadows, silent and purposeful, their weapons at their sides but ready. The cowboy paused, taking a deep breath. He could feel the energy of the crowd, the anticipation, and the silent warnings. These men were not here to harm him immediately, but they were testing him. Any sign of weakness, hesitation, or disrespect could be deadly. "Stranger," one of the warriors called, his voice calm but firm. "Do you understand our ways? Do you respect our people?" The cowboy met his gaze steadily. I respect your people more than I can express in words. I wish to help to honor your village and to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I will act with courage, respect, and care every step of the way. A murmur passed through the warriors. They exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. The cowboy knew that words alone would not convince them. He needed action, proof that he could navigate danger, think quickly, and honor their customs. The chief motioned for the cowboy to follow him to the edge of the village. There, a situation awaited that tested not just courage but intelligence. A small fire had broken out near one of the storage areas, threatening the village's supplies. The warriors stepped back, watching to see how the stranger would respond. Without hesitation, the cowboy ran toward the fire, aware that every movement was being observed. He grabbed a nearby bucket of water, throwing it on the flames with careful aim. The fire hissed and sputtered, but the cowboy did not stop. He worked quickly, moving with precision, understanding the layout of the village and the direction of the wind. He instructed the warriors and villagers around him, directing them to help safely without interfering with the effort. Slowly, the fire was brought under control. Smoke still rose, but the flames were diminished and the danger to the village was contained. The chief observed silently, but a faint spark of approval appeared in his eyes. The warriors, however, remained cautious. Their gaze was sharp, analyzing every action, judging whether the cowboy's courage was genuine or a carefully constructed act. The cowboy stepped back, chest heaving from exertion but calm in spirit. He knew this was only the first trial of the day. The warriors had seen that he could act under pressure, but the larger challenge was yet to come. The chief nodded slightly, motioning for the next phase. The village gathered near the center, forming a wide circle. The chief stepped forward, addressing the cowboy. The final test is before you. You must demonstrate not just courage, but wisdom, respect, and the ability to act under overwhelming pressure. The warriors will judge your actions. One mistake and the consequences will be severe. The cowboy felt the weight of the 300 eyes upon him. He took a deep breath, calming his mind. He understood that the test was not about fear, it was about control, intelligence, and honor. He needed to act decisively, but also with respect for the warrior's authority and the chief's guidance. A group of warriors approached, carrying supplies and weapons in a careful, deliberate manner. The cowboy realized that they were setting up a challenge, a scenario designed to test his judgment under pressure. They arranged obstacles, tools, and even mock threats, all while observing his reaction. The cowboy moved slowly, studying each element. He asked questions respectfully, demonstrating awareness of the warrior's customs and the purpose behind each action. He made careful decisions, showing leadership without arrogance. He solved small problems that arose, redirecting potential conflicts and protecting the villagers from any danger. As the hours passed, the tension grew. The warriors shifted positions, their eyes never leaving him. Every misstep could have been deadly, but the cowboy remained calm. He focused on observation, respect, and strategy, knowing that panic or rashness would cost him dearly. The chief observed from the edge of the circle, silent but attentive. He could see the careful, deliberate actions of the cowboy, the thought behind each movement, the humility in his tone, the courage in his body language. Slowly, the atmosphere began to shift. The warrior's expressions softened slightly, the whispers became fewer, and the constant tension eased, just enough to show that the stranger might be proving his worth. During the test, one of the younger warriors challenged him directly. "You are not from here," he said. "You cannot know our ways, why should we trust you with our lives?" The cowboy met his gaze steadily. "I may not be from here," he said, "but I respect your people, your customs, and your lives. I act with care, courage, and honor. I do not seek power over you, I seek to help." The young warrior studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Perhaps your actions speak louder than your words," he said. "We will see if that is true." The challenge continued into the late afternoon. The cowboy demonstrated his skill in handling tense situations, his ability to remain calm under pressure, and his willingness to put the needs of the village above his own safety. Every obstacle was a test of judgment, courage, and honor, and he met each one with careful thought and decisive action. Finally, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the chief stepped forward. "You have acted with courage, wisdom, and respect," he said. "The warriors have watched. They have judged your actions. You have shown that you can act under pressure, protect our people, and honor our customs. You may not be from here, but you have proven yourself worthy of trust." A wave of relief passed through the cowboy, but he remained cautious. The warriors had not yet fully accepted him, and he knew that one careless act could undo all of his careful work. Still, he could feel the change in the atmosphere. The tension was lighter, the whispers fewer, and the eyes of the warriors less sharp. The chief motioned for the cowboy to follow him to a quiet corner of the village. "You have done well," he said quietly. "But the test is not over. You have earned respect, but trust takes time. Remember this, courage is not enough. Honor, respect, and understanding are what protect you in this world." The cowboy nodded, feeling the weight of the chief's words. He had survived the immediate danger, proved his courage, and shown his respect. But he knew that living in this village required constant vigilance, careful action, and the ability to think quickly under pressure. As night fell, the village settled into a cautious quiet. The cowboy found a place near his horse, reflecting on the day's events. He had faced impossible pressure, acted under the watchful eyes of 300 warriors, and demonstrated courage, intelligence, and honor. He had survived not by strength alone, but by understanding, respect, and careful action. The chief approached him one last time before the firelight faded. "You have done well today," he said. "The warriors will continue to watch, but you have earned a place among those who act with courage and honor. Remember this lesson: you cannot rely on fear or force alone. True survival comes from respect, intelligence, and care." The cowboy nodded, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment mixed with lingering tension. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove himself, and new dangers. But he also knew that he had passed the most immediate test, and that his actions had earned him a small measure of trust in a world that measured men by their courage, wisdom, and honor. He settled near the fire, the night quiet around him, thinking of the trials he had faced and the lessons he had learned. 300 eyes had watched him that day, judging every word, every action, every breath, and he had survived. Not by luck, not by force, but by courage, respect, and the careful exercise of his mind and heart. As the wind swept through the canyon, carrying the sounds of the desert, the cowboy understood one thing clearly: survival in this world was not about fighting alone. It was about understanding, respecting, and protecting others, even when danger surrounded him, and he was ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. The first light of dawn crept over the canyon, painting the village in soft shades of gold and pink. The cowboy stirred, aware of the quiet hum of life beginning around him. Children's laughter mixed with the low murmur of adults preparing for the day. He could feel the eyes of the warriors upon him, though now they were not full of suspicion or immediate threat. There was still caution, yes, but also a subtle acknowledgement. He had survived the impossible and acted with courage and respect. The chief approached him silently, his steps measured and deliberate. "Today," he said softly, "you will see the results of your actions. The village judges more than your courage. They judge your heart, your wisdom, and your honor. You have proven yourself in these ways, and now you will see the impact." The cowboy followed the chief to the center of the village. There, families gathered, quietly observing him. Women who had once been distant now looked at him with curiosity rather than fear. Children peeked from behind buildings, sensing safety in his presence. The warriors formed a wide circle around them, 300 strong, their postures calm but alert. The air was tense, yet it carried a sense of resolution. The tension of yesterday had shifted into cautious respect. The chief spoke to the crowd, his voice steady and commanding. "You have seen this stranger act with honor, courage, and intelligence. He has faced the challenges we set before him without harming our people, without disrespecting our ways. He has proven that he is not an enemy but an ally. This is the man who will help protect our village if we allow it." A murmur passed through the warriors. Some nodded in approval, others whispered quietly. The cowboy remained still, letting the chief's words carry the weight of judgment. He knew that trust, once earned, was delicate, and he did not move to claim it too quickly. His heart pounded not with fear, but with awareness of the responsibility he now carried. The chief turned to him, motioning for him to speak. "You may address the people," the chief said. "Speak truthfully and humbly as you have acted." The cowboy took a deep breath, steadying his voice. "I came here as a stranger," he began. "I faced a test that I did not understand, and I admit that I was afraid, but I also knew that fear could not guide my actions. I acted with care, respect, and honor because your people deserve protection, safety, and peace. I do not seek reward or recognition. I only seek to help and to honor your trust." The warriors listened silently, their expressions shifting slowly from suspicion to understanding. The younger warrior who had spoken to him days before stepped forward. "You have spoken wisely," he said, "and your actions have proven your words. We see that you are not here to harm us, but to act with courage and respect. That is the way of honor." The cowboy nodded, a small sense of relief washing over him. He had faced impossible odds, navigated the scrutiny of hundreds of warriors, and now he was being acknowledged for the integrity and courage he had demonstrated. Yet he knew that acknowledgement did not erase the danger he had once faced. He had survived, yes, but the lessons of this experience would remain with him forever. The chief motioned toward the younger warriors and elders who had assisted him during the test. "You see," the chief said, "trust is not given lightly. Courage is necessary, but it is not sufficient. Only by understanding, respecting, and protecting others can trust be earned. This man has done so." The cowboy observed the village around him, the women tending to daily tasks, the children learning quietly through observation, the elders watching with careful attention, and the warriors, 300 strong, maintaining their disciplined presence. He realized that the chief's challenge had been far more than a test of courage. It had been a lesson in understanding, patience, and humility. It had forced him to act not for himself, but for the safety and honor of others. Later that day, the chief invited him to walk through the outskirts of the village. Here, the landscape was more open, revealing the canyon walls, the rivers, and the forests that surrounded them. The chief spoke quietly, his tone carrying both authority and reflection. "You have done well. The villagers see your courage and the warriors see your honor. But remember this, trust is fragile. You must continue to act with respect, with intelligence, and with care. Only then will your presence truly benefit us." The cowboy listened carefully. He had learned that survival was not about force alone. Strength and courage mattered, yes, but wisdom, patience, and humility mattered more. He understood that in a place like this, where every action could be scrutinized, every word judged, only careful, thoughtful decisions could ensure safety and respect. As the day wore on, he assisted with daily village tasks, this time without the immediate pressure of the test. He helped carry water, repaired structures, and shared knowledge about tools and techniques that could make life easier. Each small action was a continuation of the trust he had begun to earn. The villagers responded with cautious curiosity, asking questions and accepting guidance when offered respectfully. The chief watched from a distance, his face calm, but the approval in his eyes was unmistakable. The warrior's eyes, once sharp and cautious, softened with every observation. The cowboy realized that he had not only survived the immediate danger, but had also begun to form bonds, however delicate, with the community he had entered as a stranger. By evening, the village gathered around the central fire. The cowboy sat quietly among them, observing, listening, and reflecting. The chief approached and placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of both acknowledgement and guidance. "You have walked a dangerous path," the chief said. "You faced fear, scrutiny, and impossible odds, but you acted with honor, intelligence, and courage. Your presence here is now accepted. Remember these lessons, for they will serve you beyond these walls." The cowboy nodded, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and humility. He had survived the impossible demand, navigated the scrutiny of 300 warriors, and earned a measure of trust in a world that measured men by more than just strength. He had learned that courage alone was not enough, that respect, understanding, and thoughtful action were the true measures of a man. Night fell, and the village settled into quiet. Fires flickered softly, casting long shadows across the ground. The cowboy found a spot near his horse and reflected on everything that had transpired. He had entered the village as an outsider, faced challenges that seemed impossible, and emerged alive, respected, and wiser. The memory of the 300 warriors watching him, the chief's impossible demand, and the tension of each moment would remain with him forever. Yet in that quiet moment, he also felt a sense of peace. He had proven that courage guided by respect and intelligence could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. He had learned that true strength was not in dominating others, but in protecting them, understanding them, and earning their trust. As the stars appeared in the sky, he knew that the lessons he had learned here would guide him for the rest of his life. He had survived not by force alone, but by patience, intelligence, and honor. And in doing so, he had earned a place of respect in a world that had seemed impossible to navigate just days before. The chief approached one last time, standing silently beside him. "You will leave this place," the chief said, "but remember that the trust you have earned is not temporary. Use it wisely. Protect those who cannot protect themselves, act with honor, and never forget the lessons of this village." The cowboy nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and the depth of understanding he had gained. He mounted his horse, looking back at the village one last time. The warriors stood in formation, not in hostility, but in acknowledgement. The women and children waved quietly, a gesture of tentative trust. The chief nodded, a silent affirmation of the journey they had all shared. As he rode away from the village, the canyon stretched out before him, vast and open, filled with sunlight, shadows, and the endless possibilities of the frontier. He knew that danger would always exist, that life would continue to test him in ways he could not foresee. But he also knew that the lessons he had learned, the value of respect, intelligence, courage, and honor, would guide him through whatever challenges lay ahead. And though he had survived the impossible, he would never forget the 300 warriors, the chief's stern gaze, or the trust he had earned. It was a story of survival, yes, but more importantly, it was a story of understanding, patience, and the quiet strength of acting with honor in a world filled with danger. The wind carried across the plains, whispering through the canyon, and the cowboy rode on, ready to face the next challenge, armed not only with courage but with the knowledge that true strength was measured not by fear or force, but by wisdom, respect, and integrity.